Where Loyalties Lie by Loyalliar. Chapter 16 Sorrow. A sharp but gentle prodding brought a slight irritation to Rainbow's side. She felt sore, which was a sure sign that her nap had been interrupted far too early. What's to say, prior to high noon? The Pegasus rolled over, threw a wing over her face, and groaned. Ugh, not now, Twilight. When does your horn get so sharp, anyway? Forgive me, Rainbow Dash, but I had been hoping to speak with you. The mare shot upright to the sound of a familiar but unexpected voice. Princess Celestia? I am glad you recognize me, Rainbow. The princess answered with a chuckle. She seemed to have had a sort of glow around her, perhaps emanated from the radiant mane that she had recovered in the 5 days of the Pegasus's journey. Seeing the princess's smiling face, Rainbow's mind raced through 1,000 short memories to reach an obvious conclusion. So, is Luna okay? It did not take long for the humor to flee Celestia's face. Do not mistake my joy for success so soon, Rainbow. My sister's life is still in peril. However, you have given her a hope I had almost feared was gone forever. The princess lowered her head in gratitude before lifting up with pure focus. I understand that you're probably still tired, but the doctors need to know everything they can about the seeds you brought back. Are they meant to be the cure? Dash spared herself a moment to rub her eyes and shake her head. As she did so, she caught a glance of Celestia's opulent bedroom. Apart from a quick glance to Philomena, and a moment of surprise at the golden flowers hanging from the ceiling, she gave it little attention. The urgency in the princess's stance, moving over the bed, seemed to dominate the space. No, they're the poison. Well, sort of. Celestia's brow rose, but she allowed Rainbow to continue all the same. They're called phage seeds. How did he put it? The Pegasus struggled to remember the way the strange plants had been explained to her, but in place of the thought, she endured a moment of cold regret for the memory of the fallen Pegasus. It must have been obvious, judging by Celestia's words. Is something troubling you? Rainbow shook her head quickly to dissolve the thought, before putting on her hardest face. I'm okay. Anyway, the seeds are like magic weights. I'm not sure if they actually get rid of your magic, or just use it in the cells, or maybe block it or something. All I know is that if you eat them, your magic doesn't work for a while. Celestia cocked her head with a deeper curiosity. I had thought there was no such thing as a poison that struck one's mana. These seeds you found are an incredibly dangerous discovery. Well, they're not really a poison. Maybe that's why your doctors haven't heard of them? I've eaten them before, and so did Dead Reckoning. Rainbow's voice faltered for only the slightest of moments, but then simply fell into a silence as the huge feathered wing draped her on her shoulders. I am sorry, Rainbow. It's fine, Princess, the proud Pegasus lied. The warmth of the solar monarch's feathers made her feel like a foal again, nestling safely in easy breezes down. She forced her mind back to the question she had been asked, stubbornly refusing to acknowledge the weakness and sorrow. Anyway, if you eat the seeds, your magic goes away, but it comes back stronger. They don't do anything bad in the long run. I don't think they even could be dangerous until I met the Griffin Emperor. Magnus knew? An obvious hint of anger found its way to Celestia's eyes, though her face remained straight. No, I don't think so. I had to explain it to him before he gave me the wind to get back here faster, but he sort of made everything make sense. I didn't know about you being, immortal. The mare shrugged, and the anger faded. But he explained it was from your magic, which I guess makes sense, but then I thought about the seeds. But you are certain the seeds were what Masquerade used? Rainbow nodded slowly. That's kind of a longer story. But what matters is where we went to see this freaky elk, and he said some weird prophecy. Celestia's tone became instantly more serious, wielding the voice he had used against Discord. An elk gave you a prophecy? What did it say? Dash found no shame in recalling for Celestia's nearly tangible aura of oppressive force. It was just about curing Luna. Lots of crazy stuff I didn't understand. But he talked about some pony called reconciliation, and I needed to go to Grimford's to find a poison that wasn't a poison. I guess reconciliation was my old griffin friend Gyota. Dad shrugged. But a poison that isn't poisonous had to be the fade seeds. Celestia's seer focus retreated softly, replaced once more by her gentle, kindly smile. You show great intuition and wisdom, Rainbow. I am impressed. Now hold on, Princess. I'm not some huge egghead like Twilight. All I did was make a few lucky guesses and put stuff together. The princess's smile grew ever so slightly wider, but the change was surprising. Rather than her usual diplomatic appearance, Celestia wore the grin of a schoolfilly. In the slightest possible description, it belonged to an ecstatically proud mother. You needn't be humble your achievement, Rainbow. I guarantee you that no other pony in all of Equestria could have done what you did. Then the princess leaned forward and nuzzled Rainbow. In the closeness of the embrace, she was nearly too distracted to notice Celestia's whispered thought. At least not any more. You have done everything you can, and more than could ever be expected of you. All we could do now is wait, and trust them. I'll go speak to the doctors with what you have told me. And then I'll return, and we can speak more. Rainbow shook her head and forced herself to sit up. I think I'll just come with you. Whatever her reason, Celestia seemed to appreciate the gesture. You're welcome to, Rainbow, though if you're still tired. Nah, Daz answered, climbing down for Celestia's enormous bed. I'm not going to fall back asleep now. Too much is going on. With no more desire to contest Rainbow's wishes, Celestia turned toward the door and began to walk. It took a near gallop on the Pegasus' part to keep up with the ruler's lengthy stride. She found herself thankful that her legs were less tired than her wings, and so allowed herself to watch Celestia. The Alcorn seemed to have regained her usual regal state, quite possibly from the hope that Rainbow delivered. Though swift, her gait was stately and majestic, and her feathers and coat were preened and blushed to perfection. The golden portrayal around her neck was polished to a merest gleam, and the gilded shoes that she wore clinked in time with the perfect rhythm of her passing. They didn't speak in transit, recognizing that further words would be a distraction from Luna's care. Silence reigned over the nearly empty halls of stained glass, pure white marble, and soft velvet paper decorated with intricate patterns. Rainbow still didn't recognize many of the palace's hallways, but she knew the infirmary when she found it. It seemed as though hospital swinging doors were a universal constant, from their plain off-white tone to the nearly square windows with lightly rounded corners set near the top. They swung open at the silent bidding of Celestia's magic, and the pair stepped inside. A hurricane of doctors surrounded and flitted with a drawn curtain at the end of the room. Celestia glanced back at Rainbow and offered a short nod. Its meaning was clear. Rainbow stepped to the side of the room as the princess made her way to speak with the doctors. She glanced around a room of empty beds, and found to her surprise an equine figure leering near the door, ignored. Rainbow could make out that it was a Pegasus and nothing more. Terrible burns had claimed the coat and vest, leaving behind a charred black mass, whose sole sign of continuing life was a weak but steady heartbeat displayed on a nearby monitor. She took a step toward the chart hanging from the end of the bed, curious as to the unfortunate pony's identity. A familiar, but surprisingly unwelcome voice interrupted her. "Crap, kid! I owe Marathon 20 bits!" Mabel forced herself to take a slow breath before turning toward her least favorite guards pony. "What do you want, Crack?" The mare had to force herself not to smile at the heavy cast covering its left wing. "What happened to you?" "First off, Philly, it's—" "Don't give me any crap about rank or title or whatever the hell you call it." Rainbow didn't even shout. She didn't feel the need. "I didn't see you and Zabrika helping to save Luna." The slight recoil she earned from the bed-bound soldier was worth every word in Rainbow's mind. Thundercrack's face built up a deep red beneath his olive coat, and before he reluctantly forced himself to discharge his anger in the interest of glancing down at the ground. "Look, Rainbow Dash, I'm sorry." "Yeah, right." Rainbow Dash shook her head as she walked over to the side of Crack's bed, only to look him closer in the eyes. "Did Marathon put you up to saying that?" A long, slow breath moved through his nostrils. His answer came in the form of an embarrassed whisper. "The princess did." Daz received the first genuine chuckle in what she could reconsider recent memory. "It didn't go over well." "Hey, Private! Watch it! Just because I didn't fly flank backwards nowhere doesn't mean I didn't do my duty.
and don't you dare suggest otherwise!
His hoof gestured to a stiff wing.
Do you think I got this from falling off a ladder?
Really, Crack? I don't care. Rainbow wore a little grin. I'm not going to be a guard's pony anymore, so you could just shut up about it. To Rainbow's surprise, Crack's free wing twitched, folding under itself in what every Pegasus recognizes as a display of shame or regret. It took the sergeant a glance to his own side to recognize the unconscious motion, at which point he moved to hide it from his stern face.
That's all I wanted in the first place, filly!
Then the edge of his tone dropped off a bit.
Though you are starting to look like one of us. Did my lessons bail you out for one of those scrapes?
He nodded toward the clean scar on her right cutie mark.
Was that Manticore or...
Rainbow quickly decided she didn't want to bring up the source of that particular wound, so instead chose to respond with a fire. What part of your lessons was I supposed to learn from again? The part where you beat on me for like 6 hours, or the part where you threw me into a bar fight? Whatever reaction Rainbow might have earned was stolen away by the sound of golden hooves approaching from the mass of darkness that was at Luna's bedside. While I do fully agree that Sergeant Crack made a poor choice in his area of education, Rainbow, perhaps you could find it in yourself to forgive him. He has paid no small penance for his actions. She then shook her head with a glint in her eye. It's a tragedy that the Private's Reserve will be losing so much business, though. Rainbow laughed and cried a groan. The princess, however, continued to speak. So, of course, how you feel about forgiving him is entirely in your hooves. There was something about the way Celestia spoke that turned a gentle reprimand into a crushing load of shame. Rainbow lowered her head. Yeah, okay. I guess it did help out when I was fighting Gilda. With her gaze averted, the younger of the Pegasi missed a flash of recognition on Celestia's face. Instead, she only heard the solar ruler speak softly. You must be hungry, Rainbow, after such a long journey. I'll have the chefs prepare one of your veggie burgers and send it up here. I have something very important matters to attend to now, but I know that my sister is in the best possible hooves. A beaming smile on the princess' face filled Rainbow with pride, even before a gentle, almost sorrowful nuzzle graced her cheek. Something about the princess's comforting contact set the Pegasus off a bit. Princess, I get that you're thankful, but... The words trailed off as Celestia stepped back. Only for a split second, she looked as though she was lost without map or guide. Rainbow quickly found herself searching for the words to an apology, but they came too slow. The angeless ruler smiled politely. Forgive me, Rainbow, but it seems that my emotions have shown too frequently these days. She then made her way through the infirmary swinging doors. Thundercrack shook his head, wishing that Celestia had at least done him the decency of mentioning a less humiliating part of his recompense. In the face of enduring Rainbow's, probably, justified words, his anonymous donation to the Canterlot orphans in the amount of his full annual salary seemed the least of his concerns. Shining Armor found himself sitting in the palace ballroom, at a large table that was serving as his makeshift desk. He had rid himself of his armor in the interest of what little comfort could be achieved in the face of unrelenting paperwork. In front of him, devoid of armor or powder, was a matter of kindness, were the last 3 fight-capable Pegasus Guards ponies in the city of Canterlot. 2 sat still, back stiffened in formal posture, awaiting his word. The third, though, was making the act of writing more difficult. His horn ignited with a quick bit of idle magic, snatching a paper that was trying to run away from his quill on the wind. He didn't even bother a sparing glance at the wings that had caused the disturbance in the air. If the mare could have done something about the issue, she would likely have. To his mild irritation, one of his own subordinates raised his voice at her.
Sit down, Private!
The mare in a formal black evening dress, a stunning match for her burnt orange coat, Shining had to admit, outright ignored him. The captain glanced up and put on his captain face, a stern but emotionless expression that has left in his observer's guessing, and spoke with an even tone. I wouldn't worry about it, Corporal. The guard cocked his head ever so slightly. Permission to freak feelings, sir. You can speak however you like, Corporal, but Private Marathon is honor guard. It wouldn't do to upset her. Shining had been backing on the honor guard's curious rumored reputation as it passed from soldier to soldier in the Royal Guard barracks. Not every pony had heard those stories, and not all of them believed what was said. To Shining's satisfaction, however, the corporal had, and did. His lips were pressed shut firmly, and he spared another awkward glance Motherthon's way. She didn't even acknowledge the attention. Shining finished scrawling on his parchment and rolled it up into a scroll which he sealed with wax and magic. Sergeant Flint, you're to take this to Baltimore. At the Royal Guard barracks there, you should find Lieutenant Mayle. If she has a report for me, let her compile it. Otherwise, I want you back here immediately. The silent Pegasus saluted, tucked the scroll into a messenger bag hovering over his flank, and made his way out into the Canterlot sky. Shining then turned to the intimidated corporal. To his slight saying, he didn't know the stallion's name, but he wasn't about to draw attention to that fact. This goes to the National Guard Armory in Van Hoover. If you're looking for Lieutenant Dice. After that, he'll probably need you to run more messages. He doesn't have as large company of Pegasi as he needs. Grateful to be away from the entirely peaceful mare, the Pegasus fled his companion. Only when the ballroom was clear did Marathon swoop down and collapse into tiny stubs beneath her flanks. You shouldn't let them think such things about the Honor Guard, Captain Armor. Please, Marathon. It's just Shining today. I've been on duty too long as it is. The guard's pony sighed, and the Pegasus mare saw beneath his eyes the weariness of a stallion twice his age. From what I've seen in the past few days, an awful lot of the barracks' talk about the Honor Guard is true. Marathon flapped her wings twice, landing directly on her hips across Shining's makeshift desk, where she gave her most disarming political smile and spoke gently. You don't like us, do you? I don't mind you, Shining answered. I find it hard to imagine you are not caring about ponies' lives. You don't get to be the captain of the Royal Guard without drawing blood, did you? That's not what I mean, Marathon. Shining looked up from his paperwork and sighed. When I was in Baltimore, I saw Redding set a building full of civilians on fire, trying to kill a mayor who wasn't even his enemy. The look in the guard's pony's eye was one of fear and hatred boiled into a nameless but potent brew. Maybe he was overcome by his empha, or maybe he just didn't care. But ponies died in that fire. Shining, I wouldn't let red ink represent us any more than I let white flag represent the Royal Guard. She's Little Bear. She decided Soldier On was more important than saving those ponies. Marathon nodded with sympathy, then glanced up to the wide mantle that circled the empty ballroom. Shining followed her gaze, and saw the empty space and the even spread of statues where a stallion ought to have been standing. The Pegasus spoke softly. You haven't seen us at our best, Shining Armor. If he were still here... She let the words die, resorting to simply staring at the empty space. We all have to move on, Shining answered. Yes, we do. She turned back to him and glanced down at the parchment he was quickly rolling up. A forced smile found her way onto her face. Shining Armor had to admit, it was very convincing. Where am I moving to first? Bitterly, he answered, nudging forward his letter. On the way to Rome. Dropped it off in Tottenham at the barracks. Then tell my wife she could come home. Marathon's wings spread as she took the leather. Shining called after the mare as she departed. If my father-in-law decides that I need a few more bottles of vintage wine, and they just happen to fall in the ocean, it's no sweat off my back. His company gone, Shining finally was able to get back into the bluntly immense incident report he was writing. His attention on the document, however, was interrupted shortly by a single loud and incredibly firm knock on the ballroom's interior. Come in? He called aloud, wondering if some pony had tried to buck the door down and failed miserably. The fact that he was occupying a ballroom rather than his usual office made the need for permission seem all the more awkward. The doors opened to a gray mare with a blonde mane and huge smile. A small bruise was forming on her forehead. Sorry about that. I was just going a little too fast around that last corner and... Derpy? Shining Armor tilted his head to the side in a show of surprise. What are you doing here? In Canterlot. Huh? Oh, that's easy. Her announcement was paired with a brilliant smile, which then stuffed into a small messenger bag from her side. Special delivery from Ponyville for... She paused to put quotes into the air with her forehoofs. Some pony in the palace. I figured I know you, so you'd be the easiest to get a hold of. Okay. Shining was utterly perplexed as he took the carefully folded letter. The stock of the envelope was impeccable, suggesting that some sort of noble was as deliverer. He glanced down at the wax seal and nearly jumped. "This is for the princess! Who gave you this?"
"Oh, some mail pony in Appaloosa. She said it wasn't any rust, but I had to take a delivery to Cowsdale anyway, so I figured I'd make the stop. Anyway, it's nice to seeing you in shining armor, but I had to get back to Ponyville."
Her eyes focused for a minute, but their focus was on the ground. The life seemed to fade ever so suddenly from her body. She turned and began to fly away. "Oh, wait!" Shining called out. The mailman turned, and the captain gestured with his horn toward the broad door at the opposite side of the rooms. "Those lead out to the gardens. It's faster than trying to find your way out of the whole place." Derby nodded, but didn't say another word in response. Shining might have watched her go if his mind were not on the curious letter in his hoof. With a brisk pace, he turned his path toward the throne room. Despite the fatigue of a week's field work, his stride was brisk and sturdy. Perhaps it was the invigoration of having his magic back to normal. Knowing that some point had finally come through to help Luna was another large boost. So he carried his head high, and he passed the sparse few servants that separated the ballroom from his destination. The door swung open with what he considered a gentle prod of magic. Most unicorns would call the action strenuous, if they could manage at all. He walked forward on the thin red carpet that sat atop the marble floor and bowed. Celestia sat in all her glory atop a small dais of fountains, her crimson silk-upholstered seat once more providing a careful contrast to her tritoned mane. Her attention was on a host servant in a short tie, and was quickly taking dictation. "I'll be with you in a moment, Captain," the princess called, without turning toward him. A quill scribbled, and Celestia shook her head. That wasn't intended to go into the letter record. Continue with, "I look forward to the six of us meeting again shortly, in good health." Except for Corinne, change the last phrase in good time. Then have them sent along with the pouches I gave you. "Of course, Princess!" Brigantine bowed, turned, and swiftly exited the room. Celestia looked down at Shining with her usual political mask. "Do you need a word, Captain Armor?" "Not myself, no. A letter came, marked for you." Zora lifted the small envelope to the princess, who took it gently and opened it without remark. Shining would have excused himself there and then, had Celestia's expression not shattered into one of shock. "Is something wrong?" She didn't speak at first. Instead, her lips slowly closed, and her gaze hardened. Only after a moment did she begin to speak, with words Shining wasn't expecting. "It's for the commander." The words made their connections in Shining's heart even before his mind could process them. A walking nightmare slept into his mind, unifying every fear. Twice Sparkle lay in a hospital bed in the palace infirmary, her eyes shut, breathing soft and weak. I could only stand and watch, alongside Celestia and Luna, my parents, and my sister's friends. They are a crown of the mightiest and the best Equestria has to offer. But they are helpless against the sound that passes only moments later. A continuous, high-pitched drone and a flat green line were all that served as a eulogy in those first few seconds. "Twilight!" Shining shouted aloud, turning back toward the door. "What?" Celestia rose, her wings spreading wide. "Captain, explain!" Shining Armor's ears heard the blunt command, but his mind failed to process them, or even recognize their existence. And so, for the first time in his life, he disregarded a direct order from the princess. His thoughts alone were to protect one of the two mares in the world he couldn't imagine losing. The doors behind him nearly shattered under the arcane force he expended to open them. Rainbow stuffed her opulent burger into her mouth, too hungry to even care about the fantastic flavor. The stretched edges of her mouth were pulled open into a smile as she looked down at Luna. The doctors had flooded out, and one of the older ones mentioned that they needed to let her body adjust to their treatments before they continued. The Pegasus took the opportunity to distance herself from Thundercrack and reflect on her effort. Hers was a perfect and unshakable faith that things would turn out right for the Princess of the Night. She glanced down when the doors to the infirmary smacked loudly against the walls they were attached to. A panting, armored Shining Armor ran in, literally sliding to a stop as his shoes failed to claim traction on the linoleum. "Rainbow, I need you, now!" The mare stood up, wings rising under show of concern. "What's wrong?" "I need you to fly me to Ponyville." Thundercrack cut in, sitting up in his bed.
Get somebody else, Captain. I don't need the princess on my case any more than she already is. Let her rest.
If it were some pony else, I asked them. We've got no time. Masquerades in Ponyville. Shiny's words were delivered in a red-faced fury. Can you get me there? Rainbow glanced back at her wings, her thoughts not on her own body. Yeah, let's go. She moved for the door, but stopped when Thundercrack spoke again.
Wait, Philly. If you're going after her, at least take my armor.
We don't have the time.
Do you want her to get killed?
Craig slid out of the bed and reached under a medical cot. A heavy golden cuirass and helmet were produced with ease. He placed them on top of the mattress.
Take it, Private Dash.
Rainbow glanced at Shining, and Shining to Rainbow. Then the unicorn stallion's horn burst alight with magic, and the gilded plate armor wrapped itself over Rainbow's body. True to his name, Shining Armor moved efficiently, sparing no more than a few seconds to finish equipping the mare. As he did, Rainbow watched her hooves and legs grow wider in a shift to a white pale. Cold metal shifted over her body, changing its shape to adjust to its young feminine wearer. After a few seconds it took for its magic to do the work, Rainbow found herself indistinguishable from a generic Royal Guard officer. She shot a quick, less than meaningful glance to Crack. Thanks,
Kick her flank, Private,
was the Ender Stallion's reply, pulling the shoes off his forehooves and tossing them onto the floor in front of Rainbow. She slid them onto her hooves as he spoke.
Guards for his shoes. We'll steal Aladdin.
There were no more seconds to be spared on words. Shining literally wrenched Rainbow out of the room by magic, and released her only when he was already moving at a full sprint through the palace's network of hallways. It took Rainbow a moment to catch up, and when she did so on her hooves by way of instead of by wing, there was no point in getting ahead of Shining when she didn't know where he was going in the labyrinth corridors. Instead, she spent each step getting used to the heavy metal weapons covering her forehooves. It took less than a minute for the duo to barrel past all the servants and staff in their way, and find themselves in what might have been called a small hangar. 7 chariots of various sizes were arrayed, pointing toward a massive opening in the side of the structure. Below, the palace dropped off to hundreds, if not thousands of feet of open space that ended in the foothills of the Mountain of Dawn. Rainbow was never one to be scared of heights, but something about the sheer drop was ominous to her. Shining didn't spare an opening glance, instead leaping into the passenger's seating at the back of a small, single Pegasus chariot. Come on, Rainbow! She ducked away from the opening space, and pulled herself into the harness without a word. Her wings stretched, sore beyond belief, but functional nevertheless. Her flesh flap ended in a twinge of pain. But the second moved the chariots to gilded wheels. The train ride from Ponyville usually took about an hour, with the benefit of speed from traveling downhill through the tunnels of the mountain. An unladen Pegasus could make the trip in 45 minutes, with favorable winds. Full-on racing could let a fast pony cover the distance in 30, but that was a difficult feat. Rainbow had little respect for what most ponies thought of difficulty, however. Records existed only to be broken when all was said and done, and so, tired, sore, and burdened with the weight of an armored guard's pony in a gilded chariot, she flat, pushed, strained, and focused. Her thoughts were on her friends, but in the picture of her mind was a decidedly different pony. Her nostrils flared and her eyes narrowed as she pushed harder still. In the course of the short trip, she didn't bother trying to speak to Shining Armor. The wind was going too fast past her ears, and she knew there was nothing to say. They had the same goal and the same purpose. She spared no thought to the memory that she was returning to Ponyville in much the same manner she had left a week earlier, with a chariot carrying a unicorn. Shining Armor's mind was not so focused, as he was forced to endure the journey. Though he knew his words could never deter Rainbow Dash, bearer of loyalty, from fighting to help her friends. Thoughts of going solo brought difficult questions to mind. What would happen if she got hurt? He wasn't so sure he had an answer. No more than 12 minutes had passed before the pair made their approach. As they approached Rainbow's home, they were met with a thick blanket of gray clouds. "Is that a thunderstorm?" shouted Shining to be heard over the rush of wind past their ears. "No! They're cirrostratus. Awful thick, though. Hold on, I'm taking us down!" "Try not to draw attention!" Shining called out, just before they met the gray wall of clouds. Oh my gosh, it's the cloud barrier. They were gone for far too long. Fall of Equestria has already happened. The Pegasus embraced the resistance of the clouds, and the wet chill that built over her wings as she plowed through the streets of their hometown. She had neither the time nor the inclination to explain the strangeness of seeing such a thick layer of gloomy clouds out any time before the end of the autumn. The thoughts of a weatherman were quickly discarded for those of her guard's pony as Rainbow burst through the bottom of the clouds and gasped in shock. A huge but surprisingly well-ordered crowd was gathered in front of City Hall, facing up toward the balcony that struck off the front of the building. From her trajectory, Rainbow couldn't see what they were looking at, and her mind didn't bother to consider the idea. Her focus was on a more urgent issue. She was pointing toward a painful crash straight in the center of the group. She pulled off and banked aside as hard as her tired wings could manage. The air rumbled beneath her, and the crowd gasped. Behind her, Shiny's seat twisted in the air, struggling and straining to accompany Rainbow's strenuous dodge. One of the leads to her harness snapped, sending the cart spilling to the ground in a cacophonous crash, just over the heads of the back of the crowd. The other side of her harness, still attached firmly to the broken weight, pulled her down in a tight spin. Ponyville rolled in her vision, as grassy clouds and gray skies traded places with each other a dozen times over. Her side hit the ground with what could have been a terrible pain, but Thundercrack's armor cushioned the blow. She rolled twice along the ground, and caught herself on her knees. She glanced over to the wreckage of the chariot, and saw Shining Armor standing in front of the broken pile of wood, completely unharmed. He ran toward the front of the crowd, the eyes the very picture of focus. His armor shone with an inspiring purple light.
"Everypony, remain calm,"
were his first words. No, 2 minutes earlier, Masquerade had been sitting in that crowd, garbed in a thin and rather fashionable dark blue dress, fashioned by the bearer of generosity herself. She spent the day listening to somber ponies speak calmly about the glories and tragedies of a lost life young. Their poetic waxing about her brought a sort of sick pride, if only by the knowledge of just how many such lives she had brought to an end prematurely. Despite her entirely good intentions for staying in the little backwater town, it was hard for her to stay unhappy as she thought through the surface. Then, to her surprise and relief, something happened. Namely, a golden chariot tore through the low clouds overhead and barreled quickly out of control. She watched alongside the rest of the peaceful, docile ponies as the vehicle shattered into a pile of gilded wood and dirt torn up from the ground. The guard's pony, who was pulling the vehicle, took some time to recover from his unexpected roll. But the passenger had leapt out before the wheels even hit the ground. Shining Armor looked ready to go to war, clad fully in his amethyst sail, and wearing a focused scowl. Many criminals would have been afraid to see him approaching, and indeed, a little twinge of the deadliest emotion did pull at the assassin's heartstrings. Her mind, however, did not share in the apprehension. She was wearing the best disguise she had ever made, her own natural form. Few living ponies had ever seen her real face. She could count them on 2 hooves. Neither was the captain of the royal guard. He could walk up beside her and not notice a thing. To her mild amusement, that was exactly what had happened. Shiny strode forward through the small aisle in the middle of the crowd, scanning the eyes around him. The subtle enchantment she had placed on herself to make her blend into the crowd left his eyes to simply roll across her without any particular attention. If he had been able to recognize her, the spell wouldn't have been enough to stop his focus and determination. The knowledge that he had passed her over left her feeling as secure beneath her magic as the captain was under his armor. The guard's pony had been pulling the chariot sword overhead, scanning the crowd as well, though in the crowd of black-clad ponies, Masquerade had to imagine her mane would be difficult to spot. After a few laps, the captain gestured to the pony, and he landed atop Ponyville's largest structure, looking down at the massive crowd. The captain's stride stopped dead directly beside the assassin, on account of a short fizzle and a small pop. Twilight Sparkle, one of Masquerade's private heroes, teleported down from the balcony to stand just in front of her brother. Masquerade could have reached out and touched her without even leaning.
Shining, what are you doing here?
His eyes looked to his sisters.
"Twilight, take your friends and go home quietly."
Why? What's happening?
He leaned forward and whispered. Twilight's eyes widened, and Masquerade's did as well. She didn't need to hear his voice to read her own name on his lips. It did not take long for a cunning mind to realize his seduction must have come from the letter she delivered. She hadn't expected the mail to reach the palace the very same day she had handed off Steele's letter, but the concern wasn't pressing, regardless. Twilight spoke in response, with words that bore a surprising amount of anger. Where is she? Let me handle this, Twilight. She might be here for you. Now go! After a moment's hesitation, Twilight Sparkle nodded and disappeared with another quick teleportation. The assassin watched as the mayor and her friends fled the scene quickly and quietly. Masquerade was almost offended by the insinuation that she would kill one of the bearers of the elements, for any price. Unfortunately, a desire not to be caught left her unable to defend her honor. She was prepared to simply create a distraction and teleport away, but a nagging thought in the back of her mind stayed her horn. Namely, it was the thought of the 2,000,000 bits that Shining Armor's head was worth to her. At first, she hesitated at the contract, remembering that he too had saved Equestria before. Her contractor would be very convincing, in no small part because he was one of the 2 ponies who did know her face. His assurances that Shining, like Luna, had to die only made the money easier to accept. She cracked a tiny smile, and her horn ignited. Shining Armor scanned the crowd, though he wasn't perfectly sure what he was looking for. His own horn thought to protect against whatever illusions Masquerade would surely use to hide himself. The crowd was growing antsy as time passed, without an explanation from the guard's pony. They shuffled and squirmed and stared at him, whispering between themselves their suspicions as to his purpose in their town. The accent wasn't making his job any easier. He strode to the front of the crowd, on the steps of Town Hall, turned, and spoke quickly and forcefully. I'm here looking for a criminal named
Masquerade.
The voice was firm and gruff, familiar in an alien sort of way. It belonged to a guard's pony standing in the back of the crowd, and it drew the attention of every pony in the crowd, Shining included. A blue-gray Pegasus paced at the rear of the crowd, notable more for his garb than his physical appearance. In an army of ponies in dark coats and dresses, he alone wore his black and armor.
I am Commander Steele of the Honor Guard, he continued. Captain Armor and I have business together.
He, or rather the disguised mayor, as Shining was fully aware, shot him a fairly peculiar glance, seemingly suggesting that Shining did not interrupt. He gathered mana in his horn to stop her if she tried anything, but otherwise allowed her to act. The danger to the gathered civilians was too risk to risk a stray spell, or worse, a hostage. She had ample opportunity to exercise either option, but neither was taken. Instead, wearing the deceased commander's face, she continued her orders.
If you live here, return to your homes. Otherwise, gather to ample altars and report any pony you see attempting to sneak away. The captain and I will be with you shortly.
The ponies waited for a moment until the commander rose up on his forelegs and bucked a bolt of lightning into the sky.
Go!
He ordered, and it shocked. The ponies obeyed. An exodus of panicked ponies led to the slamming of doors and galloping of far too many hooves. Shining had been expecting Masquerade to take a hostage. Instead, he watched as the ponies fled, leaving him to face the assassin alone in the town square. He waited until most of the civilians were out of earshot before addressing her sternly. Just the 2 of us? Do you want a duel?
Don't flatter yourself, Shiny Armor. This is an assassination.
Rather than be heard taunt with words, Shining expelled the magic from his horn in a stunning burst. He knew Masquerade could have blocked or dodged. The spell was a throwaway, to learn what he could about the way she thought. The idea was that she would simply take the spell was beyond his consideration. His rose bolt faded into the black armor, and Masquerade smiled on the commander's face.
Too bad for you, Shining. Hurricane's armor is just as strong as Platinum's ward.
Despite the commander's lack of a horn, Shining had to call up a shield of his attack, was answered with a stone pulled up from the ground, wrapped in a deep blue aurora. It shattered on the face of his mana, at which point the shield was lowered. Shining gathered magic for a similar attack, but found his line of sight cut off by a blur of white, blue, and gold. Rainbow swooped down from the sky on high, throwing a hoof at Masquerade's head with a speed that the guard's pony's eyes had trouble following. The assassin, however, did not. By whatever dark magic she used to steal a pony's wings, she darted up from the ground and avoided the attack. Rainbow threw strike after strike, but not a single one even managed to connect. The distraction was dangerous, but it spared Shining the time he needed to gather an immense cloud of mana into his horn.
Get back! Now!
Rainbow's white armored body leapt aside with a surprising speed, giving the arm Clapton a clear shot. A dozen coils of purple energy shot forth from his horn, flying in wide, swift arcs, turning in midair to prevent her attempt to dodge. He watched as the magic wrapped the pony tightly, sending her tumbling to the ground.
The helmet!
On it! Rainbow slipped down and reached forward with a hoof. It found no resistance, swiping straight through the commander's face. Surprise, said the illusion before it faded away to nothing. Shining! Look out! The guard's pony had seen his error, but too late. He spun in place, expecting attack from behind. When the ground shook, his magic conjured a domed shield by force of habit and instinct. It did nothing to protect him when the wooden boards beneath his feet shattered, sending him plunging downward into the darkness. As the broken planks restored themselves onto a flat plane, Shining felt his body rattle against the stone floor. His horn burst up at light, but it didn't last long. A sudden, slicing pain moved through his neck, in the thin seam where his armor and helmet met, precipitating a howl of agony. A blue glow lit the halls of space, which apparently the basement of Ponyville's town hall. Dusty boxes and barrels were arranged haphazardly around the dark room. A rather small dinner knife clattered to the floor. Apologies, Captain. That was unprofessional of me. You shouldn't have felt anything. Masquerade's hoof pressed down on the side of Shining's helmet and wrenched it off. It rolled across the stone floor, producing a sad sound only barely registered over Shining's agony. He barely maintained the focus to shoot a quick burst of energy without letting the mana grow unstable. It was fast and feral, enough to knock Masquerade back several feet, but it did not truly hurt her. The warm blood sheeped down Shining's white coat, between his armor and his body, as he struggled to stand. Magic built in his horn slowly, just quickly enough to throw up a small shield that intercepted Masquerade's next attack. The bolt of misty magic spilled across the rose ward and onto the basement walls, where huge spurts of stone crumbled and melted into the glowing dust. The guard's pony then threw the shield itself forward. Unlike the illusion she had conjured, the real assassin lacked the black armor of the commander, and instead was forced to jump out of the way of the attack. In retribution, a magical burst shot towards Shining's horn, and he only barely managed to duck beneath it. In the momentary distraction, Masquerade's magic wrapped around her own body in a spell Shining didn't recognize. Not so easy, am I? In case you don't remember, it took you and Rainbow Dash to beat me at Canterlot, and I was pretending to be a Pegasus then. She shot two more bolts, but they spilled over the shield that was Shining's special talent. You might as well give up. If I have to get original, it might be painful. She leapt to the side suddenly, further than the captain would have thought possible for such a small, fragile-looking mare. His shield was barely fast enough to catch the next attack for her new angle. If you want, I could tell you your wife said you loved her. Shining's horns nearly exploded with a surge of mana. Masquerade barely managed to teleport aside with her life. A beam of rose power carved a tunnel 6 feet deep into the wall opposite of the captain.
Stay away from her!
Masquerade's horn released a stronger glow of its own, and the shards of broken stone from Shining's wrath rose into the air, surrounding him. If it makes you feel any better, I charged more for her than Luna. Her projectiles flew as one. Shining threw up a domed shield, stopping two, but the force of the third was too great for him to stop under the pain of his neck. It shattered Platinum's ward, but the force was still great enough to topple the unicorn stallion. His blood spilled onto the cold floor as Masquerade strode forward slowly. Tell Celestia she has my apologies when you see her. Shiny teleported away just a moment before Masquerade's table knife could have cut through his throat. The sensation of dizziness after such a spell was only compounded by his lack of blood. A quick volley of stunning blasts flew from his horn, virtually without aim. One tagged the mare on her flank, tearing through her dress just below her cutie mark. The white mask of tragedy seemed to be mocking Shining as the assassin stumbled, struggling to balance on 3 legs. The distraction was enough time for Shining to gather the mana for another spell, but not before Masquerade let her misty magic envelop her own body. His next spell was carefully aimed, targeting her core directly. His shot flew true, and he made no move to block or dodge. Yet the rose ball of energy soared over her shoulder as though it had been misaligned from the start.
You know, I wonder if any pony will care that I killed you after what I did to the princess.
Masquerade answered Shining's attacks with lethal blasts of her own, and he rolled to the side in order to save his mana. The action was disorienting and painful, but it allowed him to respond with an attack of his own. A sheer wall of telekinetic force sent the assassin flying, alongside the rubble and boxes that filled the bland basement. Masquerade's magic went out, and the sheer painful noise of a body hitting a stone wall was the only assurance that the captain received he had scored a hit. He focused quickly, conjuring enough mana to illuminate the room. Masquerade was simply gone. Immediately, the captain lowered himself, spinning quickly to check in every direction. He could find no sign of his foe, and so he waited, gathered more mana with every passing moment. A small surge was spared to pull up a shield over the wound on his neck, now that he earned the opportunity. It wouldn't give him back his blood, or stop the pain, but it would hopefully keep enough in to prevent him from bleeding out in the middle of battle. Shining couldn't help but wish he had Twilight present to tell him what to do. He only knew the straightforward, military style of battle. He could pull off cunning tricks and fast thinking, but a foe who relied on misdirection and fast and lethal blows was something he had no experience against. A thought tickled his mind, and he grabbed a huge mass of rubble in his magical grip. A quick, forceful motion sent it spilling over the room. No invisible mare was revealed, thankfully. At least one of the impossibilities of magic he had learned still held true. He paced slowly amongst the scattering of boxes and broken stones, searching for anything out of the ordinary. It was hard to make out the fine details by the light of his horn alone, but he focused nevertheless. Whether by sheer luck or brilliance, the corner of his eye caught something with the last possible moment. One of the crates was clean of dust. He lashed out it suddenly with a steel-lined horehoof, and found satisfaction that his limb traveled through the illusory wood, striking hard at the flesh that could be found beneath. Masquerade called out in pain, but recovered quickly enough to roll back out of Shining's reach. He sent 3 more stunning blows her way, watched all 3 fall away from the shields he had conjured a mere inch from her muzzle. The fact that she had resorted to blocking his clearly stronger magic meant she was growing desperate. This time had come to finish their battle. The captain released the rest of his mana he had channeled into Platinum's ward, producing a radiant red and purple glow across the room. Masquerade watched carefully as Shining Armor lowered himself, pointing his horn toward her. She gathered mana, ready to meet his onslaught, and found herself caught off guard when he charged her outright. She ducked to the side, as he had been hoping she would. His left hoof caught her on the shoulder. The contact was brief, nearly harmless, but it lasted long enough for his quick spell to go off. In a flash of light, the basement was left behind, and a small wall of gray clouds surrounded them. They fell together, water and wind rushing through their coats. He wouldn't allow her to regain her focus, or mana. His hooves lashed out with heavy blows to her body, cracking bones and eliciting gasps of pain. He only spared her the assault when they cleared the base of gray clouds over Ponyville, mere seconds away from a lethal collision with the ground. 2 rose shields were enough to spare them the death, but the crack of bodies on grass was still painful and audible. Shining gasped. Masquerade moaned. From where he was laying, Shining could see Rainbow fighting with all her might to break through the wooden planks that served as a patio for the town hall. She looked over with a stallion's face at the sound of their landing, and wings flared. I got...
Not again!
He didn't understand what the words meant. For a moment, his struggling mind fought to process the strange call. Then the fatigue of magic, battle, and loss of blood swamped him into darkness. Rainbow Dash roared, flying up on the white wings, only to pound down with her full force against the boards that had swallowed Shining. Dents and cracks had begun to appear, but they faded and repaired themselves as soon as the mare pulled back for another strike. She screamed in fury, only to be cut off by a pair of successive thuds, as bodies struck again the grass nearby. She looked over to Shining, Armor turned slowly toward her. His neck had been slashed open, and far too much blood was spilled over his coat. God. What he didn't see was Masquerade rise up behind him. She was limping, but Rainbow was able to watch as a dozen other wounds on her torso faded away into bursts of blue magic. Slowly, her hose lowered from levitating to touch the ground mid-fall. A similar illusion fled from her horn, revealing a long metal spike. The same one Rainbow had seen the assassin wield against Princess Luna. "Not again!" she yelled, flying as fast as the moment's acceleration could take her. Masquerade had no idea what hit her, as Rainbow's full body tackle ended in the unicorn being picked up fully and carried off the streets of Ponyville. "What the?" Masquerade was completely lost as the form of a grown stallion carried her upward once more into the air. The cold black metal spike that covered her horn took on the glow of her own as her own fell magic. Rainbow spared one of her forelegs from holding the assassin in order to strike at the obvious threat. Normally, such a blow would have done away with the magic, but the strange artifact shielded the assassin against the attack. The potent grip of her telekinesis wrapped around Rainbow's wing, stiffening it in place and sending them both soaring mares into a spiraling fall. The Pegasus didn't see where the unicorn landed when she released her grip. She was hoping to regain control of herself, but the effort proved foolish. Masquerade's telekinesis was pulling toward the mare herself, and as she fell toward the ground, a sickening crack issued from Rainbow's right wing. She knew the pain of a broken bone, as he spiraled down toward one of the grassy hills on the outskirts of Ponyville. The little knoll in question was called Cemetery Hill by the town's inhabitants. No more than 24 headstones dotted the grounds. One of them, sitting above a freshly dug grave, welcomed Rainbow to the ground by shattering in half on the impact. Rainbow found herself again thankful for the armor she was wearing, well aware that the blow would have shattered her shoulder or neck. The Pegasus struggled to her host slowly, only to hear the gentle laughter approaching from the direction of the city.
"You should just stay down, Guards Pony. You aren't even worth anything to me. Just stay out of the way, and I'll let you go."
"You're not getting shining armor," Rainbow answered. Her still functional wing flared, and her eyes bored down to terrible determination. The indigo mare smiled cruelly.
"It's your life to throw away."
Then a bolt of magic flew toward Rainbow. She leapt aside quickly, enduring the agony of the motion. Cold, wet air seared her lungs as she panted for breath.
"Give up!" "You can't say that unless you're winning."
Masquerade's horn ignited, and then a perfect copy of the mare stepped out of her own body. Another followed, and then a third. They paced slowly around Rainbow's hilltop, watching her closely. The mare struggled to discern the true assassin from her illusions, and found no obvious clue. They spoke together in three voices, perfectly as one.
"Anything you want to say before you die? I have to tell Celestia that Luna said goodbye before she fell."
More than anything else, Rainbow needed time. Her mind raced. Can't fly. No, she didn't. She was too busy focused on making the stars. No sonic rainbow.
"What? How do you know that?"
If I ran at her, she killed me before I got into the kick, even if I guessed the right one. I was there, Masquerade. Remember? I could try and buck lightning, but it might not work, and I'd still be guessing. The Masquerades cocked their heads and hurled into a trio that spells at Rainbow. 3 misty bolts connected, but only one offered a jerking force to the left, knocking away Thundercrack's helmet. Between her eyes, her muzzle shifted to her usual sighting. Her radiant mane spilled down her neck. The assassin gasped and began to laugh.
"Rainbow Dash, you're alive."
"So is Luna." Rainbow answered with a smirk, knowing exactly where to aim. She stared down at the wrong Masquerade, lining up her hind legs to strike at the source of the blast to her head. She drew up her hind legs and bucked with her own might. The strength did not carry the electric spark, but her desperation did. Her need was unimaginable, not only herself, but also for Shining and for Luna. The gray clouds overhead rumbled in acknowledgment of her sheer force of will. The air cracked and flashed. A sheer streak of raw electricity flew free from her hind legs toward the source of the magic. The illusions in front of Rainbow disappeared. She smiled as he fell to her knees, spent from fatigue and the drain of her empha. Then a laughing voice approached, walking slowly up the hill. Ever hear of a shell game, Miss Das? Despite her tone, Masquerade's face clearly she was furious. If Luna really is alive, then you made me feel a contract. I don't fail! Rainbow moved to stand, but she had barely shifted at all when a bolt of arcane force bowled her onto her side, sending her tumbling down Cemetery Hill. Her wings sent frozen spears of pain into her body as she rolled over it again and again. The assassin followed, seizing both halves of the headstone the Pegasus had broken on her landing, carrying them above her head. Normally, I feel bad about killing one of the bearers of the elements, but honestly, you're already dead to every pony else. Her magic brought the two halves of the broken stone together, and Rainbow Grass cried out in shock and fear. Carved into the smooth surface of the stone was a stylized cloud, releasing a mighty bolt of lightning. Rainbow struggled to kick another bolt of lightning at the approaching mare, but the energy was no longer into her body. She watched as her death approached, but she didn't truly see Masquerade's glare. Mom wrapped a soft downing wing around me. Mommy will always love you, my sweet little Rainbow. Always. Masquerade's hooves slid down the soft grass, casting aside the turf with each angry step. The fine hairs of her coat were plastered in dust, and the limping rear legs struggled to keep her pace. Papa held me as tightly as we sat in the box seats of the Colosseum, watching the pretty ponies in royal blue and vibrant gold soar at impossible speeds. I want to fly like them, Papa. You will, Rainbow. I will teach you, I promise. In the distance, Ponyville saw the first droplets of rain as the mass of low clouds finally gave way, as the few droplets spilled onto Rainbow's muzzle. It had been raining off schedule the first time I came to Ponyville, too. And it was my birthday, the only opening for a weather mare I could find, made obvious by the problems with the weather. I hadn't expected my old friend Fluttershy to be sitting there, waiting for me, down to the town's grassy streets. The assassin raised her Brutus blunt weapon high over Rainbow's head. A few pebbles, loose pebble fell from the broken edges of the headstone. She watched it overhead and tried desperately to move, but her body wouldn't obey her. I embraced my 5 best friends in the entire world, putting on a less than joyous face at this sad display, but inwardly wishing the moment would last forever. Masquerade spoke spitefully. Goodbye, Rainbow Dash. Rainbow closed her eyes, and the stone came down. The first thing Rainbow felt with death was a sensation of warmth and a slight pressure from above. The raindrops stopped, but the pain of her wing and gentle tickle of the grass against her coat lingered. A clear, determined voice spoke from above her. You will never harm another of my subjects, Masquerade. Rainbow's eyes shot open. Princess Celestia stood over the grown mare as a mother by a foal. Her horns shed a radiant golden light, seizing the broken headstone with her own tiara. The stone shattered to dust with no more effort than a thought. Masquerade recoiled in shock and turned to run. Her magic created a dozen doubles, which ran limping in every direction at once. The princess glanced over them casually, stopping on the third that her eyes met. The illusion faded in a casual burst of Alcorn's magic. Another such action dragged the mare back to face her angry ruler. The fear on Masquerade's face was unrestrained. Tears streamed down her face as she met Celestia's stony gaze. Please, Princess, I'm sorry. Don't plead to me. Celestia interrupted coldly, leaning forward until Masquerade could feel her breath. I won't be the one deciding your fate. For now, contemplate your crimes. Masquerade's response was stolen wholly by a blinding burst of golden magic. Rainbow recoiled from the light, squinting until it burned through her eyelids. The fizz of arcane power was accompanied by the unusual sound of earthen crackling. For 5 full seconds, the show of power continued. Then the light faded, and the sound stopped. The wounded Pegasus opened her eyes to the sight of a sheer marble figure, holding her forelegs over her horn in terror, and squinting away from the wrath of an immortal being, indefinitely her greater. It took far too long for Rainbow to recognize that the statue was Masquerade, and when she did, she found fear mixed with her relief.
Are you all right, Rainbow?
Dash shook herself, looking up the Alicorn. Celestia stepped aside, allowing the young Pegasus to rise.
She broke my wing.
Rainbow answered with an odd, hollow voice. But shining armor...
I know.
Celestia calmly responded, wrapping her ring around Rainbow once again.
I found him first.
Her horn ignited, and a brilliant golden light surrounded the pair. When they faded, they stood at the edge of Ponyville's town square. 5 familiar faces had huddled around the fallen captain, as if nothing had changed. Celestia continued her words.
Shining armor gave me little to work with when he ran out of my throne room without a word. Fortunately, Thundercrack knew where I could find you. I only regret that I did not arrive more quickly.
Rainbow Dash barely registered the words. Her attention was given to struggling out from under Celestia's wing and running with haggard steps toward the friends that she hadn't seen in far too long.
Rainbow, wait!
Hey, girls! Their reactions were cold enough to stop Dash. Cold. 5 heads shot out to look at her. None smiled, at first. They only stared, quietly sparing quick glances between one another. Pinkie Pie was the first to shake away her unwelcoming awe. She ran forward and tackled her friend, a motion which gave Rainbow no small amount of pain.
Dashing! You're alive!
Ow, yeah, Rainbow winced and shook herself. Pinkie, let go!
Never!
My wing is broken. The grip gave away instantly.
Sorry.
In her moment of painful distraction, Applejack, Rarity, and Fluttershy had approached. They stood close to Rainbow with tearing eyes and disbelieving smiles. Applejack spoke up first.
I can't believe it, Rainbow. We thought you all was dead. What are you doing putting us through that?
I wasn't dead. I got hurt. But Celestia healed me.
Healing magic?
Rarity's brows rose strangely.
But last from the princess. But I always heard such a thing was a matter of fiction. Still, if it brings you back to us, I shall suspend my disbelief.
Rainbow nodded. Then I went to find a cure for Luna. Fluttershy let out a surprised squeak.
That was why you were gone? That's very brave of you. Come on, Fluttershy,
Pinkie Pie smiled.
It's Tassie.
No, she is not. 5 of the bearers of elements of harmony turned as their 6 members strode forward. Twilight Sparkle was furious. Her muzzle was pointed straight into the ground, leaving her eyes to glare out the tops of her sockets. This might look nice, girls, but it's a trick, or a cruel joke, or something. Rainbow Dash is dead.
Come on, Twilight, I'm right.
Don't say I!
Celestia shouted, her voice reverberating with magic.
I don't know who you are, but you are Rainbow Dash!
Twilight, come on. Princess heal me.
Rainbow wasn't just hurt!
Twilight yelled.
I know. I saw what was left behind.
The unicorn panted with fury as he walked up to Rainbow's face.
Her skull was in 2 places. Her spine was sticking out of the back of her neck. I found one of her wings 10 feet away from where she crashed.
What?
Rainbow stepped back in fear, stumbling as Twilight continued forward. Their movement only stopped when Rainbow felt a wide, gentle wing over her back.
Twilight,
began Celestia.
This is Rainbow Dash, your friend.
Twilight's jaw hung low, flabbergasted.
You wouldn't. Princess, please.
Don't lie to us!
I'm not Twilight. Celestia looked down at Rainbow with sorrow in her eyes. I have something to say to all of you. Something that I hope I wouldn't have to say. The Solar Princess glanced upward into the soft rain falling from the gray sky. I hope you can forgive me. From the upper floor of the Golden Oaks Library in Ponyville was home to the non-fiction section. But that was not why its inhabitants had gathered there. Instead, they chose the space for its privacy, and because its lack of furniture gave plenty of room for them to gather in a circle, in theory. In practice, Celestia draped her wing over Rainbow as the two sat side by side. Opposite them, the other 5 bears waited for an explanation from Equestria's ruler. Twilight only had just taken her seat among her friends, after seeing to her wounded brother's comfort downstairs. The alicorn looked over their waiting faces, then sighed.
I think I should perhaps begin this explanation by saying that Twilight was not incorrect. But Rainbow is sitting right there, Piggy Pie protested, so obviously she didn't die.
I'm afraid that isn't as obvious as it might seem. Celestia's head turned toward Rainbow, but jerked back when Twilight gasped.
Princess, you don't mean...
Celestia nodded.
I'm afraid I do, my faithful student.
Can some pony stop skipping all damn important beats and explain what the hell's going on?
Twilight turned to the farm pony.
Princess Celestia raised Rainbow from the dead.
What? The word came from more than one mouth, Rainbow's included. She alone continued the thought.
You mean I died?
Celestia looked down at the mare with pity in her eyes.
Yes, Rainbow Dash. Saving my sister's life a week ago in Canterlot cost you your own.
Then she could no longer stand to look down into the violet eyes of an innocent mare, and turned to face the wall of bookshelves behind her student.
You earned your eternal reward, but I had to take it away from you. You were the only pony who knew what had happened with Masquerade atop the Academy Tower, and I needed answers if I wanted to save my sister.
Look, Princess, I'm not seeing anything wrong with this. I should be thanking you, right?
No,
Twilight answered.
Raising a creature from the dead is cruel, especially for a pony. That kind of magic is called necromancy, and it's forbidden because of what it does.
Twilight looked at Celestia with a mix of awe and something like disappointment.
A pony can steal a soul back from the summer lands, or Tartarus, in theory, and bind it back to its body. But the body will decay and rot until it's nothing but a skeleton, unless it feeds on the meat of its own kind. These undead monsters are often bound to the will of their creators, leaving them without free will of their own.
For just a moment, the dark rivers of Sobrika returned to Rainbow's mind. Twilight, however, wasn't done.
It's worse for the poor Sunny's soul, though, because it knows what it's supposed to be somewhere else. There's a constant tug to go back to wherever it was stolen from, but the magic forces it to remain here, in the land of the living.
Celeste's concerned friends looked over to Rainbow as she stood up. Confused, at the alicorn too ashamed to look her way, Celestia directed her attention to Twilight and responded gently.
You are correct, Twilight, though my methods were not as dark as many in the past. I was able to restore Rainbow's body fully, without the need for raw meat or the loss of her free will. I suffered the return of her soul the best I could, but the call of the Summerlands is something I can do nothing about.
The covering wing was left away from Rainbow's back as Celestia stood up to her full height. Her host carried her to the glass doors leading to the balcony, where she stared out at the rain. It was her last hope that turning her face away would keep her from seeing the tears of disappointment on her student's face, and the darkness she fully expected from her sister's savior.
It had been my intention to return Rainbow to the summer lands when her quest was over, so that she wouldn't have to face that pain. I had kept what I had done in secret, because I felt it would be kinder to simply let you think her dead than to give her back, only to steal her away again.
She glanced back over her shoulder toward the Pegasus for just a second, though in all her wisdom she saw nothing.
Rainbow, I hid the letters you wrote them. I knew that if I promised I would deliver them, you wouldn't turn to some pony else to contact your friends. It was cruel of me to force you back in the first place, but I needed my sister, and in my grief, your soul seemed like a small price to pay.
The princess hung her head in shame, as she finished her words with the two most simple and most familiar words she could ever imagine.
I'm sorry.
The 6 friends shared each other's company without words, as a silent conversation danced between their eyes. Rainbow found herself in shock, barely acknowledging those who glanced her way. It was Twilight Sparkle who ultimately spoke up, turning toward Celestia.
What happens now, Princess?
The alicorn turned back with a sorrowful gaze.
Nothing has changed. Rainbow's soul needs to go back.
It isn't meant to be trapped here in Equestria any longer. Don't talk to me like I'm not here! Rainbow's shout was that of an ignored foe, desperate and muscle. What if I don't want to go back? I still have my friends here, my life, and my job. I did what you asked. I joined your guard and saved Luna, and now you think I should give everything up? I'm sorry, Rainbow, but it will be easier. You have a strong will, but in time, the pull will break even that. I've seen what ponies become when they linger too long in a world they aren't meant for. You don't want that. You don't want your friends to remember you like that. No! Rainbow flared her one good wing, standing tall to face the deity too cowardly to meet her eye to eye. I'd rather live! As she stalked her way past her friend, Celestia turns. If it becomes too much for you, Rainbow, you need only come to see me, or my sister, if you can no longer bear to see me. When Rainbow slammed the library door, its sound faded into total silence. Celestia continued to stare out the window, watching the rain as it tapped against the window. The 6 remaining ponies remained at a place for almost a minute before she spoke again, unprompted. You can see now why I no longer wield the elements of harmony. Where was my honesty when I told you that your friend was dead? Where was my kindness and generosity when I stole away her reward for my own benefit? Where were laughter and my magic when I cried alone, unable to save my sister? She turned slowly, as the pain of looking away finally overwhelmed her fear of the 5 ponies' silent judgments. Where was my loyalty when I betrayed all of you? Princess, I think we all understand, Rarity answered. Perhaps the circumstances were cruel to you, but you made your choices to save Princess Luna because you love her. I fear I may have done the same for Sweetie Belle in your situation. Celestia smiled sadly, as a few gentle tears rolled down her cheeks, clearly distinct from the rain behind her. That is a lie. I have told myself every night for the past week, Rarity, because it helps me to sleep. The truth is, I have saved my sister for my own gain. She turned to Twilight. Immortality is lonely, and though I fill myself with ponies with my life with ponies I love, they always fade in time. Star Swirl, Miracle, Algricity, Hurricane, Sunset. An obvious wistful longing carried that last name. They fade so quickly. Even Twilight will be gone by the span of my life. Luna is my only companion, and banishing her away was the hardest choice I could ever make. I could never survive without her. No pony responded for so long that, at last, Celestia turned toward the doors once more, spreading her wings. It was a soft voice, calm and gentle, which stopped her. What can we do to help her? Fluttershy asked of her ruler. Be her friend. Stand by her. The stronger her ties to her life, the longer she will last. And if something happens? Twilight added quickly. If she dies before my spell is broken, her soul will be trapped here forever. The non-answer was the princess's only prelude to a mighty flap that carried her up into the gray clouds. A short burst of golden magic was enough to tell him that she had gone home. The day had passed in Ponyville beneath the gray skies. Rainbow Dash had asked for time alone, and her friends had reluctantly granted it, only demanded that she make her way to the hospital to have her wing taken care of. Bluntly lying, she told him she'd make the visit. In the somber atmosphere of the rain, the young mayor wandered the back streets of town, ignoring the locals who were slowly building up the courage to leave their homes and investigate the source of the disturbance they had heard earlier. A few noticed her, or spared surprised looks in her directions, but she offered him none of her own in the constant rain. Her broken wings hung limply at her side, dragging through the mud and lids shifting slowly from a vibrant blue to a pale white. She left his armor in the library, discarded in disgust at the princess, her guard, and everything they stood for. She had stopped her slow walk when she reached the far side of Cemetery Hill. The grassy mound was enough to block her resting place from a proper view of Ponyville. She leaned back against the backside of a headstone and stared at the marble statue that had once been a deadly assassin. Looks like we both got screwed over, huh? She asked the petrified statue, her words dripping with sarcasm. Celestia sticks you in a statue, and I get to look forward to going crazy for the rest of my life. Not exactly the reward I was expecting. As expected, Masquerade said nothing. This whole thing wouldn't have happened if you hadn't tried to kill Princess Luna, you know. It's all your fault. The statue didn't answer her. I joined the guard because of you. Shining armor got hurt because of what you did. Her breath grew ragged, and her words punctuated by spite with each passing word. The commander and the other guards pulling are you dead, and it's your fault! I died because of you! Dizzy reared up on her hind legs. Reckoning is dead because of you! Her right forehoofd swung around the most furious blow she had ever delivered. With a thunderous crack, both from the force of Rainbow's empha and the shattering of marble, Masquerade's right foreleg fell to the ground beside her petrified body. No scream or cry of pain followed the wound, save Rainbow falling back against the headstone again, panting and staring at her hooves. Shame mixed with anger in her blood, but she did not regret what she had done. She had only her reflection in solid steel hooves. At first, they were marred with muddy grad, but the steady rain soon wiped them clear to show a haggard, tired face. It was the face of a pony filled with grief, fury, and determination, and it seemed to her to be all she had left. The shoes were the last vestige of the guard in her life, in more than one way. As she pulled the first of the shoes from her hooves, she spoke to Masquerade once more. You know, my dad was a guard's pony. The shoe slipped onto the grass and landed at Masquerade's hooves. He was named after these shoes. Steel lining. The second shoe came off as he balanced it on her naked hooves as he spoke. Well, I'm done with him and the guard now. Thanks for nothing, Dad! The shoe flew over her shoulder, almost instantly vanishing in the veil of rain. Rainbow sat there for nearly an hour longer, before wandering off to find somewhere to sleep. Twilight had offered the library's upper room, and it was a good sight as any Rainbow could think of. The sun set lowly as he stumbled back through town, as he spitefully found herself to be rid of his light. The library door opened at her gentle touch, as she wandered in, dripping and cold. Shining armor was gone from his earlier place on the couch, and neither Twilight nor Spike were anywhere to be seen in the main room. Only Aloysius was present to give acknowledgment to the returning mayor. Rainbow paid him no mind as she stumbled up the stairs to Twilight's guest room, where she fought into bed. Despite the pain in her wing, the sensation of the soft mattress was amazing. She might very well fall asleep a moment later, were it not for the clear rapping at the window. What? Grunting, the mayor turned over and called out, Is somebody there?
Yes, Lady Dash,
Came the reply. The second voice added to the first.
The princess wishes to speak with you.
The simple phrase incited all of Rainbow's fury. She stood up and wandered over to the window. Well, I'd rather never see the princess again. So... Her words simply trailed away as she saw the Alicorn mare sitting in a chariot just outside the window. Forgive us apologies, if I have offended you, Rainbow Dash. We were told that we might find you here. Princess Luna smiled gently, nodding toward the two night guards keeping her chariot hovering in midair, as if explaining her use of the regular plural. Might we come inside? Okay, Rainbow managed to utter, caught completely by surprise. She struggled out of the way as Luna crawled through the tiny opening, followed by her two guards. Rainbow glanced between them, knowing that only their genders set apart. Luna pulled off a heavy black cloak with her teeth, which one of the night guard threw over his back without further word. Revealed, Rainbow could see the damage that the Fade Seas had done to her body. She was as small and frail as she had been the first time the two met, after the defeat of Nightmare Moon. Her mane was a short-crotched pale blue, utterly mundane in the way it hung about her face. Her cheeks were gaunt, even for her normally slim build. There was an obvious lack of muscle on her legs and flank, a fair majority of her feathers fallen out, and her eyes seemed more than a bit sunken. Nevertheless, the smile on her face as she embraced Rainbow was a pleasure to behold. Thank thee, Rainbow. It is my understanding you have saved my life. Rainbow noted that the grip of her hug was weak, and it ended very quickly. Then Luna fell back onto her haunches, wearing her smile. Though I am afraid I have been feeling my age recently. Rainbow joined her in a hearty chuckle, which also ended seemingly too soon. Perchance the hour is unreasonable to your health, but I, cannot bear to spare the night without showing you my gratitude. It's fine, Princess. She held up a hoof. Please, Rainbow Dash, you, of all ponies, have the right to use my name. If anything, I ought to bestow you upon a title. I,
I felt that Lady Des was a befitting name, mistress, but she turned it away.
Said the stallion to two night guards. Quiet! The princess is talking. Rainbow irked her brow. Third brother? Luna looked between their guards. So, you have met my night guard, then? The mayor nodded. Just him, Princess. I told him to watch over her, but when she flew across the ocean... The words trailed off as though their thought was obvious, though Rainbow didn't understand. The obvious question was stolen away when the mayor turned back to the Pegasus. You can call me eldest sister, by the way. You too. Rainbow answered constantly, scratching her head. Listen, sorry, Luna. Today's been a really, really awful day, and I sort of dislike it to be offered. I know, she answered bluntly. My sister was in tears when I awoke. Rainbow's face curled. Do you expect me to forgive her? Luna shook her head. Perhaps someday, but not now. Celestia needs to feel the pain in her heart, as I once did, or she will not learn from this. At a slight show of surprise on Rainbow's face, the tired princess continued. I know what she did. I was the one who sent you to rest in the first place. But I understand why you might not want to leave your friends in your youth. So I offer you a solution. When the pain in your heart becomes too great to endure, see me. Should you ever need or want for anything, you need only ask. Okay, Luna. Thanks, really. You have no need to thank me for my own thanks. We would waste away our days expressing gratitude. But I do have one request. Sure, what? Luna glanced towards her two guards and straight into Rainbow's eyes. My night guard needs a captain, and I think... No, Luna. Rainbow shook her head firmly. I'm done with being a guard's pony. Of course. But may I ask you why? Rainbow nodded slowly. Being a guard means giving up everything else. My dad gave up his family. Same thing for Dead Reckoning. He didn't have a family or anything. He told me all his friends were other guards' ponies. And while I was out there, I didn't get to see my friends either. I'm not giving everything up again. We understand, Luna answered, before turning secretly towards a window. She moved slowly, but stopped at the threshold of the room. Perhaps I could make one more request, Rainbow. Yeah? Might you consider me your friend? Rainbow smiled and nodded. Of course, Luna. Then sleep well, Rainbow Dash, and we will speak again in time. Know that all of Equestria thanks you when they look upon our night. As Luna and her guards left the library and Rainbow climbed to bed, she pondered quietly where the plurality of Luna's parting phrase was deliberate. The commander gasped in agony as his body flopped limp on the dirt of the wasteland. A gas in his stomach, a foot deep, revealed his most necessary of organs, and it spilled forth the very essence of his life at a rate too fast to stop. The Pegasus was too weak to fight back as a bowl of beels was poured onto the wound. Had he any breath remaining, he would have screamed out loud in pain. Had he any tears, he would have cried. Instead, dry but shaking eyes watched as the tusk of the boar war chief ignited with divine magic. His own blood dripped from the massive tusk at the sort of his fatal wound. He only longed that the blow would have gone too deep, or too far. He might have finally met the end of all things. Coggin was too cold, too skilled in battle to allow such a mistake. His magic stitched the pony's flesh together, restoring his body moments before it expired. He could still feel the beetles eating away at his flesh from within. To them he wished speed, knowing that they would be slow about their work.
Take him back to his cell, and let his guests enjoy their dinner for the night.
Coggin gave a hearty laugh.
Perhaps no. You finally regret your actions as much as my kind have, Commander. But I doubt it. You still have much to learn of suffering.
The boar shoved the commander and kicked him, but he could not have moved if he wanted to. He didn't even register their hard blows against his body. His agony was already beyond his mind's capacity to understand. He was hoisted in a field of magic and carried into a rough tunnel carved in a dusty red cliff. He had been lucid enough the first night of his unending torture to learn of the path, though the knowledge did him no good with a shattered wing and a broken leg. He couldn't fight, he couldn't fly, and he couldn't run. His only option was to remain and suffer, until Kagan grew bored enough to grant him death. His cell was a tiny chamber carved from red stone, nearly devoid of light. A tiny window sat up 6 feet up into the wall, too small to crawl through even without its bars. In the morning, the sun shone through it. He knew perfectly well that such a successor was another of Kagan's fateful thoughts, showing him a sign of Celestia, as if it were a promise of the freedom he would never have again. When the cell door was slammed behind him, the Boer warriors left him alone. He pulled himself over to the nearest wall, and scratched a second tally mark into the wall. He wasn't sure why he did it, really. It was just something he vaguely knew prisoners did in fiction. He had no use for the information, except a record of his suffering. Days in the desert were hot, but it was the nights that chilled the stone. Suffering and too much pain or sleep that truly bothered him. He could barely focus as his host moved over to his other carving. This one was far more intricate. It had taken him all the previous night to get the rough shape down. Now he was on to adding a face. Unlike his tally marks, this one gave him the hope of at least someone to speak to, who could perhaps sympathize with his suffering. Only 4 short strokes into the carving. He broke through, though he desperately wanted.
Is somebody there?
Yes. The words were hard to utter, given the laceration in his lungs. Oh, that won't do, Commander. Perhaps you can think better than you can speak. He struggled to focus through the pain.
A bit discord. How's Catalot?
Oh, things are going wonderfully. Luna died, and Kren and Magnus have gone to war with Celestia, trying to claim her gift. Though the commander's face didn't change from his pain and grimace, the spark of concern that flit through his mind was obvious to the mischievous spirit. No, I'm afraid your precious boring civilization is still standing in your absence. And here I'd been hoping everything would go pear-shaped if you weren't around to murder and kidnap the other races into submission. Funny how do you criticize the assassin for that sort of behavior.
How do you know about Masquerade?
Oh, please. Do you really think she figured out how to get past your security all by herself? Does she know how to expect your magic armor or your lightning? Discord's laughter rang through the commander's mind for a full minute. You truly just don't consider the world around you. Does physical danger not intimidate you anymore? I bet you're regretting telling me how everything worked in exchange for my leads, aren't you?
No, Discord. I don't regret a thing.
Ha! Excellent. I love your spirit, Commander. It's too bad you aren't still around. Although I do have to admit, your successor could create some wonderful chaos as well as his own, admittedly rather blunt way.
My successor?
I don't think I want to tell you that. Steel, was it?
Why not? I'm going to die here. Can't act on it.
Is that what you think? Discord's laughter grew stronger still. Oh, that is precious. You have no idea.
I thought you didn't look into the future, Discord.
What kind of spirit of chaos would I be if I never broke my own rules? I hope you weren't looking forward to the end. After all, this is only the beginning. End of Act 1. No, folks. Tune in tomorrow. We're not completely done with the story yet. We still got at least 3 epilogue chapters left. But for now, this is the end of Act 1. Yes, I know. You can send hate mail to darn you martial art fruit user at IHateYourGuts.com. Thank you.